he gave his only coat. What happened next changed everything. The biting wind sliced through the city, a relentless blizzard blanketing the usually bustling streets in a hushed white silence. Arthur, 46, a former construction engineer, recently widowed and now homeless, huddled under a flickering streetlight at a nearly deserted bus stop. His threadbare olive green coat barely kept the chill at bay. He clutched a worn briefcase to his chest, its contents: 5 rejection letters, a stark reminder of his struggles. His breath plumed in the frigid air, a ghostly exhale mirroring the fading embers of his hope. The pharmacy's crimson glow blinked 8:41 p.m. The bus was late, the cold seeping into his worn boots. Then, through the swirling snow, she appeared. A woman, perhaps in her 30s, impeccably dressed in a business suit, yet without a coat. Her high heels clicking on the pavement. Her wet hair clung to her face, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She stopped beneath the bus shelter, her breath coming in short gasps, her hands visibly trembling. Arthur, initially trying to ignore her, found himself drawn to her, a striking figure of polished composure, yet clearly suffering in the brutal cold. He watched her rub her bare hands together, the gesture futile against the penetrating chill. Another night, another bus to nowhere. But then the wind howled. She shivered, and he saw a chance to break the cycle. His coat wasn't much, but it was something. He could keep it, stay silent, blend into the anonymity of the night. He didn't. Without a word, he removed his coat, the icy air instantly a sharper pang. He walked towards her, offering it. Startled, she protested, "You don't have to do this." Arthur offered a weary smile. "I've lost enough today. This coat. It's the only thing I have left to give." She hesitated. "But you need it more than I do." Gently, he draped it over her shoulders. "Not tonight." The unexpected warmth surprised her. It smelled faintly of soap, perhaps coffee, comfort. She unconsciously pulled it tighter. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, crossing his arms against the cold. They stood in silence as the snow fell around them. After a moment, she turned to him. "What's your name, Arthur?" "I'm Isabella." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Isabella." She looked at him intently. "You shouldn't have given me your coat," he shrugged lightly. "Probably not, but I couldn't just let you freeze." The low rumble of an approaching bus broke the silence. Headlights cut through the snow as it pulled to a stop. Isabella turned to him, then back to the bus. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Arthur shrugged. "Somewhere," he mumbled, the unspoken truth. The back seat of a rusty pickup truck behind a warehouse, hanging heavy in the air. She retrieved her purse, handing him a business card. "In case you need anything." He took it, slipping it into his briefcase without looking. He didn't expect to use it. People said things like that all the time. Most didn't mean it. Isabella boarded the bus, glancing back once more, the coat wrapped around her like a shield. Arthur watched until it disappeared into the swirling snow. Alone again, he shivered, not from the cold, but from something else. Something small, quiet, powerful.
Oh.
He looked up at the sky, then at the empty street. "Maybe tomorrow," he whispered, turning and walking into the night. The old truck was rusty, its heater long broken. A makeshift nest of blankets on the front seat, a pillow tucked in the corner, a lunchbox hidden under the dashboard. He got in, closed the door, and sat in silence. From the glove compartment, he took out a small tin box. Inside, a faded photograph, his wife, Eleanor, radiant with a smile, and his son, Ethan, around 7, with a mischievous grin. "Good night, Eleanor," Arthur whispered. "Good night, Ethan." He leaned back, his eyes on the ceiling, letting memories envelop him. He had been Arthur Vance, a structural engineer. He built things, schools, houses, hospitals. He had a wife who taught kindergarten, who laughed easily, even when life was hard. His son had her laugh, bright, unfiltered. They weren't rich, but they were content. Then cancer came. Stage 4 by the time it was discovered. Eleanor was gone in 9 months. Arthur quit his job to care for her. After that, everything fell apart. Bills piled up, savings dwindled. He sold the house, moving with Ethan into smaller and smaller spaces, until there was nothing left but the truck. Still, he tried to protect his son, turning the back seat into a spaceship. Canned soup into adventures, a parking lot into their backyard. Every morning he took Ethan to school, clean-shaven, shirt tucked in. "Why do you still get your hair cut?" Shelter worker once asked. Arthur smiled. "'Cause my son needs to believe things can get better, and I need to look like I believe it too." He worked every odd job he could find, moving furniture, fixing gutters, sweeping construction sites. It wasn't enough, but it kept them together until last fall. A social worker intervened, said it wasn't safe, said Ethan needed stability. Arthur didn't argue. He knew they were right. Eyes blurred, he signed the papers, hugged his son, and promised, "Just for now, I'll be back for you." Since then, each day had been a climb. He sent out resumes, stood in job fair lines, scribbled notes in free workshops, studied codes at the library. He was building a plan, slowly, quietly. Tonight, that plan felt further away than ever, sitting in his cold truck, rubbing his arms for warmth. He thought of Isabella, the woman at the bus stop. How cold she had looked, how surprised she was when he offered his coat. He didn't know why he'd done it. Maybe because she reminded him of Eleanor, or maybe he just needed to feel he could still do something good, that he was still the man who gave more than he received. Outside, the snow kept falling. Arthur pulled a blanket over himself, leaned against the cold window, and closed his eyes. He didn't have much, but he still had himself, and for now, that would have to be enough. Isabella entered the elegant lobby of her apartment building, the indoor warmth enfolding her like a soft blanket. The doorman offered a polite nod, but she barely registered it. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor as she headed for the elevator, still wrapped in the coat the stranger had given her. She hadn't intended to take it. In fact, she'd tried to refuse, but the man, Arthur, he'd said, had insisted, a look in his eyes that silenced any protest. Now the coat hung awkwardly on her, too large, too worn, yet warmer than anything she'd worn in years. She stepped into her penthouse apartment on the 28th floor, immediately met by silence. No television, no music, no laughter, just the hum of modern appliances and the distant howl of the winter wind through thick glass windows. Isabella dropped her bag by the entryway and slowly removed the coat. She was about to set it aside when her fingers brushed against something in the inside pocket. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn, creased at the corners, smudged with fingerprints and time. She unfolded it carefully. It was a child's drawing, done in crayon. Two stick figures held hands beneath a lopsided sun. One was labeled Dad, the other Me. A small heart floated between them. At the bottom, in uneven lettering, were the words, "I love you, Daddy, Ethan." Isabella froze. She stared at the drawing, the words blurring before her eyes. A tremor ran through her, and she sank onto the edge of the sofa, the coat still in one hand, the picture in the other. Her throat tightened. Ethan. The name snagged in her mind like a barb. The way Arthur carried his briefcase, the weariness in his eyes, the weight in his voice. It all made sense now. This wasn't just a man who'd given her his coat. This was a father who still carried a piece of his son close to his heart. A father who had nothing yet still chose to give. She looked around her apartment. The place was immaculate. Ceilings, designer furniture, walls of glass, not a single picture frame or personal touch. A space designed for success, not warmth. Isabella folded the drawing gently and placed it in her lap. Then, without thinking, she pulled the coat close and hugged it to her chest. The cat still faintly smelled of something familiar. Perhaps laundry detergent, perhaps memory. And suddenly, without warning, tears welled up in her eyes. She hadn't cried in years. Not really. Not since she was a little girl, cold and hungry, sitting on the steps of her church, hoping someone would notice her. That night, someone had noticed. A man with kind eyes and a weathered face. He'd taken off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. He hadn't said much, just smiled and said she'd be okay. It was the first act of kindness she remembered, the first time she'd felt seen. She'd never seen the man again, but that moment changed everything. Isabella sniffed and wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. She wasn't that little girl anymore. She'd clawed her way out of the foster care system, worked her way through college on scholarships, and sheer grit built Nexus Group from a single app idea into one of the East Coast's most influential tech companies. She'd earned every dollar, every accolade. But somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten what it meant to need, what it meant to give. Tonight, a stranger had reminded her. She looked again at the drawing, at the small, trembling heart between the stick figures, then at the coat in her arms. Too big to warn, yet heavy with meaning. And for the first time in a long time, Isabella Vance cried, not because she was broken, but because something inside her had been gently, beautifully cracked. The next morning, Isabella sat at her desk, an untouched cup of coffee growing cold beside her. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, but her eyes were fixed on the crumpled drawing in her hand. The edges were worn now from being unfolded and refolded, as if she were trying to memorize every crayon stroke. She'd barely slept. She kept replaying the previous night. The way Arthur had offered his only coat, without hesitation, the quiet dignity in his voice, the pain behind his weary smile. Something about him haunted her, not just the kindness but the sadness he'd tried so hard to conceal. She reached into the top drawer of her desk and pulled out a small silver bell. Moments later, her assistant Sarah entered. "Yes, Miss Vance. I need you to help me find someone," Isabella said, her tone calm but firm. Sarah blinked. "Of course. Who?" Isabella hesitated for a fraction of a second. "His name is Arthur. I don't have a last name. He was at the bus stop on 56th and Madison last night, around 8:30. He gave me his coat. I want to find him." Sarah looked surprised but nodded. "I'll see what I can do. Sarah, this stays between us." In the following days, Isabella's instructions were executed with quiet efficiency. Her team, accustomed to locating elusive developers and harassed executives, now turned their skills to piecing together the life of a man living in the shadows. They pulled traffic camera footage from nearby intersections. Arthur's figure appeared briefly, blurred and shrouded in his coat. They tracked bus routes that stopped in that area around the time Isabella had boarded. Cross-referencing with passenger manifests, they narrowed it down to a handful of potential riders. None matched corporate databases. Finally, Sarah returned with a thin folder. "His name is Arthur Miles," she said. "Used to be a structural engineer.
Oh.
No recent employment records. I found some posts on online forums asking about job openings. He listed a contact number linked to a prepaid phone. No permanent address." Isabella flipped through the pages. Copy of an old driver's license photo, a LinkedIn profile frozen in time, a scan of a construction license long expired, no arrest records, no scandals, just absence. Isabella closed the folder. The silence in the room was heavy. "Where is he now?" Sarah shifted. "One of our guys spotted him yesterday near the far South Bronx. There's an old pickup truck parked behind a warehouse. He's been seen going in and out, sleeping in it." Isabella stood. "I want to go there." Sarah hesitated. "Isabella, are you sure? Could arrange for someone to approach him, or bring him here?" "No," Isabella interrupted. "This isn't a meeting. It's personal." Sarah said nothing, but her eyes softened. "I'll send a car."
Hour later.
Isabella sat in the back of a black sedan as it snaked through streets a world away from boardrooms and glass towers. They passed shuttered shops, graffiti-covered walls, and people moving with heads bowed against the cold. The driver stopped near the warehouse. Isabella saw it immediately, the old pickup truck tucked into the shadows. Snow piled around its tires. It looked like it hadn't moved in days. She stepped out into the cold. The air smelled of rust and damp concrete. Her heels clicked softly on the gravel as she walked slowly toward the truck. Through the windshield, she could just make out a figure in the front seat. As she approached, the door creaked open. Arthur emerged, blinking in the daylight. He looked at her with confusion at first, then recognition. His expression shifted, astonishment, caution, then something like embarrassment. "Isabella," he said, his voice hoarse with sleep and surprise. She offered a small, uncertain smile. "Hi, Arthur." He looked at himself, at his rumpled clothes, his snow-covered boots, the truck behind him. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," she said simply. He frowned, crossing his arms. "Why?" she hesitated. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you did, about the kind of person who gives their only coat to a stranger." Arthur let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't need to track me down for that. A thank you note would have sufficed." "It's not about thank you," she said. "It's about not letting something good disappear unseen." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Two people from different worlds, connected by an improbable act in a bitter wind. Arthur finally exhaled. You came all the way here just for that, Isabella nodded. Yes, and maybe something more. The next time Isabella saw Arthur, he was bent over a pile of concrete blocks on a construction site on the edge of Queens. She waited in her car for 20 minutes, watching from a distance as he moved steadily, silently, carrying, stacking, lifting in the biting cold. With the quiet resolve of a man used to being overlooked, he wore a worn flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearms despite the chill, and his breath puffed out in visible clouds. His hands were calloused, his nails dirty, but his movements were precise, efficient, determined. When he took his break and sat on a low wall with a plastic water bottle in hand, Isabella got out of the car and walked towards him. Arthur looked up and did a double take. He rose quickly, brushing dust off his pants. Isabella. Hi again, she said, her smile small, genuine. What are you doing here? She handed him a cup of coffee she'd brought with her. Thought you might want something warm. He took it hesitantly, his eyes searching hers. You really didn't need to. I know, but I wanted to. They stood in silence for a moment before she added, Would you come with me? Just for a little while? I'd like to show you something. Arthur looked down at his work boots, then back to the foreman in the distance. I still have a few hours left on my shift. I've already spoken to him, Isabella said. Told him you had an interview. His eyebrows rose. I don't have an interview. You do now, she replied. Arthur chuckled shortly, more surprised than amused. Okay, let's see what this is about. They drove in silence. Arthur looked out the window, shifting occasionally, self-conscious of his appearance. Dusty jeans, rough hands, the faint trace of sweat at his collar. Isabella didn't seem to notice. When they arrived at Nexus Group's downtown headquarters, Arthur hesitated in the marble-floored lobby, taking in the massive glass walls. The polished chrome, the incessant hum of people in suits. I don't belong here, he said softly. Isabella turned to him. Just come up. They entered a private conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Isabella offered him a seat, then closed the door and sat across from him. Arthur cleared his throat. So, what's all this about? Returning the coat? Isabella shook her head. No, it's not about the coat. I kept it. It's mine now. Arthur blinked. Okay, she leaned forward. I didn't come here to thank you. I came because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. A version of myself I'd buried under years of boardrooms and deadlines. You reminded me that real change doesn't always begin with innovation or strategy. Sometimes it starts with kindness. Arthur looked down. Isabella, I'm just a guy trying to survive, and that's exactly why I brought you here. She slid a folder across the table to him. Inside was a job offer, a contract, a new position, cultural and human values advisor. Arthur frowned as he flipped through the pages. What is this? It's a new role, one I created. Someone who participates in departmental decisions, training programs, development discussions. Not to talk numbers or strategy, but people, values, compassion. You would share your experiences, help shape the heart of this company? Arthur chuckled awkwardly, shaking his head. Isabella, look at me. I don't have a degree in psychology. I didn't graduate from Harvard. I sleep in a pickup truck. We're an engineer. I haven't built anything in years. You built a moment I'll never forget, Isabella said softly. Arthur looked away, chastened. This isn't charity, she continued. This is a position only you can fill. You know what it's like to be invisible, to be overlooked, and yet you stopped in the cold and gave your only coat to a stranger. That tells me more about leadership than any resume ever could. He opened his mouth, closed it, struggled for words. I'm not qualified, he said finally, his voice low. Isabella leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. You don't need a degree to teach people to care, because you live it every day. Isabella looked directly into his eyes and said, You don't need credentials to teach people to be kind, because you've lived that, and that's more powerful than anything you'll ever put on paper. Arthur's throat tightened. He looked at the offer, then back at her, and for the first time in years, he felt something flicker inside him. Not fear, not defeat, but hope. Raw, unfamiliar, frightening hope. Arthur sat alone on a bench outside the imposing office building, the job offer resting unread in his lap. His fingers traced the edges of the folder, but his eyes were fixed on the bustling street, unfocused. He couldn't do it. It wasn't that he didn't want to. Somewhere deep down he did. But fear, strong and familiar, the kind that whispered cruel things late at night, gripped him. She's just being kind. This isn't real. You'll mess it up. You'll always mess up. The offer felt like a trap wrapped in kindness. And Arthur, who had spent years learning to distrust anything that seemed too good to be true, couldn't shake the weight of doubt. Arthur Vance's life wasn't a fairy tale. He'd hit rock bottom, sleeping rough, job hunting in holy shoes. Stark contrast to the gleaming skyscrapers of Nexus Group, where he'd unexpectedly landed an interview. Isabella Vance, the CEO, saw something beyond the worn-out suit and weary eyes. Their first meeting wasn't in a boardroom. It was a silent car ride, a journey away from the city's glitz to a humble red brick building, a haven for children. The Refuge, place Isabella built to honor the kindness of a stranger who'd saved her as a freezing runaway. The laughter of kids playing, the scent of crayons and baking bread hit Arthur like a wave. He saw a reflection of his own past struggles, and the woman who'd offered him not just a job, but a lifeline. Isabella didn't need another Sutantai executive. She needed someone to remind everyone of compassion. Arthur's unconventional approach to business was to ask, not to dictate. Instead of charts, he used empathy. Questions like, when was the last time you truly saw someone resonated? He didn't fix problems. He offered perspective, reminding overworked employees that exhaustion wasn't weakness, just a sign of caring too long without reciprocation. His words, simple yet profound, became company mantras, scrawled on office doors, printed on mugs. He was a human lighthouse in a world of spreadsheets. His impact was subtle but seismic. Nexus transformed. Productivity soared not from pressure, but from a renewed sense of connection. Arthur's quiet strength earned him an office, a modest home with his son Ethan, and a slow, meaningful reconciliation with his family. His relationship with Isabella blossomed organically. Shared lunches, subway rides, movie nights, a comfortable silence shared between two souls, who learned the hard way to wear their defenses lightly. Their love story was about finding solace in vulnerability, not grand gestures, but quiet understanding. One day, Isabella unveiled a Kindness Day celebration, a poignant tribute to the old, worn coat a stranger gave her years ago, a symbol of the unexpected kindness that had changed her life. She publicly recognized Arthur, the man who'd unknowingly mirrored that act, restoring her hope and inspiring a profound shift in company culture. It was more than a company event. It was a testament to the power of human connection. The ceremony wasn't about awards, but about remembering. Arthur's response, he proposed. He presented Isabella with a simple silver ring, a symbol of the quiet transformation he'd experienced. Their wedding was a joyous reflection of the Refuge's warmth, simple but profound. It was a celebration not just of their love, but of the ripple effect of one small act of kindness immortalized in a photograph. Arthur and Isabella beneath the Refuge's sign, side by side, a weathered coat a silent witness to their journey. Picture that went viral, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human heart. A reminder that kindness, however small, can redefine a life, create a legacy, and transform a world. One heart, one coat, one quiet act of compassion at a time. If you felt touched by this story, if it reminded you of the hope that lives in unexpected places, please like, share, and subscribe to Uplifting Tales. We tell stories that warm the heart and remind us of what truly matters. Be kind and keep believing. What act of kindness changed your life? Tell us in the comments below.